My name is Morgan Reynolds, 37, and I'm standing in my brother's corner office, the one with the view he's bragged about for years, watching as security escorts him from the building. His face is crimson with rage eyes, wild with disbelief, as he realizes the partnership agreement he waved in my face during Thanksgiving dinner last year is now worthless paper. The company he built, the one he said I was too poor and inexperienced to have a stake in, is now 70% mine, and he never saw it coming. Before I tell you how we got here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this story of family karma, hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. The journey from that humiliating Thanksgiving to today's sweet justice is quite the ride, and trust me, what my brother didn't know about his financially incompetent sister would ultimately become his downfall. Growing up in the Reynolds family meant living in the shadow of my older brother Derek. 3 years, my senior Derek was the golden child, the academic prodigy who graduated top of his class at Wharton and landed a prestigious investment banking position straight out of college. Our parents, both successful entrepreneurs themselves, beamed with pride at every accomplishment, every bonus, every promotion. His graduation party was legendary in our hometown of Boston. His engagement to Clarissa, the daughter of a hedge fund manager, warranted a spread in the local society pages. I, on the other hand, was the family's creative one. While my interests in art history and anthropology were tolerated, they were never celebrated the way Derek's business acumen was. My father would affectionately tousle my hair and say, "At least you'll marry well, Morgan," as if that was the highest aspiration I should have. My mother would schedule career intervention lunches where she'd slide brochures for business schools across the table while I picked at overpriced salads. When I chose to attend a state university instead of following Derek's Ivy League path, the disappointment was palpable. "We just worry about your future," my mother would say. While my father was more blunt, art history majors serve coffee to business majors after graduation. Their concerns weren't entirely unfounded. I did struggle financially after college, bouncing between museum internships and administrative jobs that barely covered my rent in a cramped apartment I shared with 2 roommates. Derek, meanwhile, was thriving. By 30, he had left investment banking to launch his own financial technology company, FinEdge Solutions. The initial rounds of funding came easily thanks to his network and reputation. When he called our parents to announce his first $1 million contract, they threw an impromptu dinner party to celebrate. I was invited as an afterthought, receiving the text 2 hours before dinner was served. "Maybe your sister can learn something," I overheard my father telling Derek that night. "God knows she needs some financial sense knocked into her." What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that while I was struggling, I was also learning. My administrative job was at a venture capital firm specializing in tech startups. I answered phones and scheduled meetings, but I also absorbed everything. I read every business plan that crossed my desk. I listened in on pitch meetings. I stayed late to organize files and used that time to study investment patterns and market trends. And I saved. Every bonus, every tax return, every bit of birthday money went into my investment account. I lived frugally, wearing second-hand clothes and taking the bus while Derek drove his luxury cars and vacationed in the Maldives. I didn't date much, didn't have time between my full-time job and the online business courses I was taking at night. Courses I paid for myself without telling my family because I was tired of their dismissal. By the time I was 32, I had built a modest but respectable investment portfolio. Nothing that would impress Derek, but enough to make me feel secure. I had also made myself indispensable at the venture capital firm, moving from administrative assistant to research analyst. My bosses recognized what my family didn't. I had an eye for promising startups and an instinct for which founders had both the vision and the discipline to succeed. That Thanksgiving 5 years ago marked a turning point. Derek had just secured a major round of funding for FinEdge, and the dinner conversation centered on nothing else. My mother had outdone herself with the meal, preparing all of Derek's favorites. A special bottle of champagne was opened. Toast after toast was made to my brother's success. To the family's financial wizard, my father said, clinking glasses with Derek. Who would have thought that boy who used to count his pennies in a piggy bank would be running a multi-million-dollar enterprise? Speaking of family, my mother interjected, looking pointedly at me, isn't it time to bring Morgan into the company, Derek? Surely there's something she could do there. Reception, perhaps. The table fell silent. Derek looked at me with what I can only describe as pity mixed with embarrassment. I felt my cheeks burn. Mom, FinEdge is a sophisticated financial platform, he said carefully. We need people with business acumen, financial expertise. I have a master's in business now, I said quietly. I finished it last year. The surprise on their faces would have been comical if it weren't so hurtful. My father recovered first. Online, I assume not quite the same as Wharton, is it? I work at Beacon Ventures now, I continued, ignoring the jab. I've been promoted twice in 3 years. That's great, sis, Derek said in the same tone he used when I'd show him my art projects as a child. But FinEdge is in a growth phase. We need serious investors' partnerships that bring value. No offense, but you're not exactly in the financial position to be a meaningful stakeholder. I have savings, I protested. I've been investing. Morgan, Derek interrupted. The minimum buy-in for partners at this stage is 7 figures. I know you're doing better, and that's great, but let's be realistic. You're still playing in the kiddie pool and FinEdge is swimming in the ocean. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document, waving it in the air. This partnership agreement is worth millions now. In a few years, it'll be worth tens of millions. I've already had to turn down friends from business school. He laughed. Can you imagine? These guys manage hedge funds and even they couldn't meet my terms. My father nodded approvingly. Smart business. Never dilute your control for small money. Exactly, Derek agreed. If you want to be part of FinEdge, Morgan, maybe we can talk in 5 or 10 years when you've built up some real capital. For now, focus on keeping that job at the venture firm. Good experience. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I smiled and nodded, made appropriate noises of admiration as Derek detailed his expansion plans. Inside, though, something had hardened. The dismissal, the condescension, the assumption that I would never be their equal, it crystallized into a resolve I'd never felt before. That night, as I prepared to leave, Derek pulled me aside. Hey, I hope I didn't embarrass you at dinner. Just trying to keep expectations realistic, you know. Of course, I said, smiling. Actually, I'm glad you're doing so well. I might even have some ideas for FinEdge's expansion. Always the creative one, he laughed, patting my shoulder. Stick to your art history, sis. Leave the business to those of us built for it. I just nodded, already formulating a plan. Derek saw me as a financial lightweight incapable of playing in his league. It was time to show my brother, to show all of them exactly what Morgan Reynolds was capable of. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I requested a meeting with Julian Vega, the founding partner at Beacon Ventures where I worked. Julian was a legend in venture capital, known for his unconventional background. He'd been a literature professor before making a fortune in early tech investments, and his willingness to take risks on overlooked opportunities. Morgan, he said, as I entered his minimalist office. Unusual for you to request formal meeting time. Everything okay? I need your advice, I said, sitting across from him. But first, I need your discretion. Julian's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. Of course. My brother's company, FinEdge Solutions, it's on your radar, right? Julian leaned back in his chair. Derek Reynolds is your brother. Interesting. You've never mentioned that. There's a reason for that, I replied. Our family dynamics are complicated. But yes, he's my brother and I've been following FinEdge closely. I think there are serious vulnerabilities in their business model that aren't being addressed. For the next hour, I presented my analysis of FinEdge. I'd studied their public filings, press releases, and product launches. I'd created dummy accounts to test their platform and found concerning security issues. I'd tracked their hiring patterns and noticed they were top-heavy with sales but understaffed in engineering. Most critically, I'd identified a regulatory blind spot that could prove catastrophic when new financial data protection laws came into effect the following year. Julian listened without interruption, his expression neutral. When I finished, he steepled his fingers and studied me for a long moment. 2 questions, he finally said. First, why are you bringing this to me instead of your brother? And second, what exactly are you proposing? Derek doesn't believe I have the financial or business acumen to contribute meaningfully to his company, I said, keeping my voice even despite the lingering sting. He made that abundantly clear over Thanksgiving dinner. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. This is my personal portfolio. I've been investing systematically for the past decade. It's not kiddie pool money, as my brother would say. Julian flipped through the documents, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. Morgan, this is impressive. You've outperformed most of our junior analysts. I've been learning from the best, I said with a slight smile. But it's still not enough to secure a partnership stake in FinEdge, at least not directly. And that's what you want, a stake in your brother's company. What I want is for my brother, for my entire family to recognize that I'm not just the artistic Reynolds who got lucky with a job. I have real skills, real insights, and I've built real wealth through discipline and smart decisions. Julian closed the folder. You still haven't answered my second question. What are you proposing? I want Beacon to consider taking a significant position in FinEdge with certain conditions. I slid another document across the desk. This is my proposal. I'm willing to contribute 80% of my personal portfolio to co-invest with Beacon, and I want to lead the deal. Julian skimmed the document, then looked up sharply. You're suggesting we acquire a controlling interest. Your brother would never agree to this. He will if you're the face of the deal, not me. Derek respects Beacon. He respects you. He'd see this as a validation of his success, not a threat. And you want to remain anonymous until after the deal closes, Julian said, reading further. Morgan, this is unusual. Some might say it borders on deceptive. Is it deceptive to use a shell company for acquisitions, to operate through subsidiaries, to create special-purpose vehicles for investments? These are standard practices in our industry. Not typically employed against family members, Julian pointed out. I'm not trying to harm FinEdge or Derek, quite the opposite. The company has potential, but it also has serious vulnerabilities that Derek is too proud to address. With Beacon's backing and my insights, we can strengthen those weaknesses before they become critical. Julian tapped the proposal thoughtfully. And after the deal closes, when Derek discovers his sister is a major stakeholder, then we have a long overdue conversation about respect, recognition, and the fact that the artistic Reynolds has been building her own empire all along. Julian was silent for several minutes, considering. Finally, he said, I'll need to present this to the investment committee. Without revealing your personal connection, of course. The deal needs to stand on its own merits. I'd expect nothing less, I replied. Over the next few weeks, I prepared exhaustive analysis for the investment committee. I worked nights and weekends examining every aspect of FinEdge's business, identifying both risks and untapped opportunities. I created detailed plans for how Beacon could add value beyond capital, introducing strategic partnerships, strengthening the engineering team, addressing the regulatory compliance issues before they became problems. When the investment committee met in January, Julian presented the opportunity. I sat quietly at the back of the room, just another analyst taking notes. The discussion was rigorous, challenging exactly as it should be. But by the end of the 3-hour meeting, the committee had approved moving forward with due diligence. "Congratulations," Julian said afterward when we were alone in his office. "This is either the most brilliant or the most reckless career move I've ever witnessed." "Maybe it's both," I admitted, "but I need to do this." "For what it's worth," Julian said, "your brother is an idiot for underestimating you. You've just produced the most thorough pre-investment analysis I've seen in years." The due diligence process took 2 months. I recused myself officially to avoid any conflicts of interest, but Julian kept me informed of progress. The findings confirmed my initial assessment. FinEdge had a strong foundation and impressive growth, but significant vulnerabilities that Derek either didn't recognize or was ignoring. In March, Julian made the initial approach to Derek. I stayed completely in the background, anxiously awaiting updates. From Julian's reports, my brother was initially surprised, but quickly became excited about the potential partnership with Beacon. The prestige of having a top-tier venture firm invest would elevate FinEdge's profile considerably. The negotiations were delicate. Derek predictably resisted giving up too much control. Julian, playing his role perfectly, insisted on a significant stake given the capital and strategic value Beacon would bring. "Your brother is stubborn," Julian told me after a particularly tense negotiation session, "but he's also eager for the validation. We'll get there." And in May, they did. Derek agreed to sell a 55% stake to Beacon's special purpose vehicle, a shell company that would shield my involvement until after closing. The documents were signed, the funds transferred. The deal was done. Now came the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading, revealing to Derek exactly who his new major investor was. The morning after the deal closed, I sat in Julian's office, my stomach in knots. We'd agreed that he would call Derek for a meeting to introduce the lead partner from Beacon, who would be working most closely with FinEdge. That partner, of course, was me. "Are you sure you want to do it this way?" Julian asked. "We could ease him into it." I shook my head. "No more hiding. No more being underestimated. It's time for Derek to see me as I am." Julian nodded and dialed Derek's number, putting it on speaker. "Derek, congratulations again on the partnership. I'd like to introduce you to your primary contact at Beacon, the person who actually identified FinEdge as a strategic investment opportunity for us. Can you come to our offices this afternoon?" "Of course," Derek replied, his voice brimming with satisfaction. "I'm eager to get started. FinEdge is going to reach new heights with Beacon's backing. Excellent. 2 o'clock works for us." I spent the hours before the meeting alternating between reviewing business strategies for FinEdge and trying to calm my racing heart. This confrontation was years in the making, not just since last Thanksgiving, but since childhood. The moment when all of them would finally see me clearly. At precisely 2 o'clock, the receptionist announced Derek's arrival. Julian met him in the lobby and escorted him to the large conference room we'd prepared. I waited in an adjoining room, watching through the one-way glass as my brother settled himself at the table, arranging his portfolio and smartphone with the practiced precision of someone accustomed to important meetings. "So where's this mysterious lead partner?" Derek asked, checking his watch. "I'm looking forward to meeting the person smart enough to recognize FinEdge's potential. She'll be joining us momentarily," Julian replied, giving me my cue. I took a deep breath, straightened my tailored suit, a far cry from the thrift store clothes Derek was used to seeing me in, and entered the conference room. The look on Derek's face was worth every moment of the years I'd spent being dismissed. Confusion, disbelief, and then the dawning horror of realization. "Morgan," he stammered. "What are you doing here? Are you working for Beacon now?" "I thought hello, Derek," I said calmly, taking the seat at the head of the table. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't work for Beacon. I'm a partner at Beacon. Have been for the past 18 months, actually." Derek looked frantically between Julian and me. "I don't understand." What is this about? Julian slid a folder across the table. Your sister has been with Beacon for 5 years. She rose from analyst to partner faster than anyone in our firm's history. She also happens to be the architect of our investment in FinEdge. Derek opened the folder with shaking hands, scanning the documents inside. This can't be right. This says the investment vehicle that purchased the controlling stake in my company is Reynolds Strategic Partners. I finished for him, my holding company. But that would mean that I control 55% of FinEdge. I nodded, yes. And when you factor in my personal investment through Beacon's fund, my total ownership is closer to 70%. Derek's face flushed deep red. This is some kind of sick joke, or a con. You can't possibly have had the capital to. Actually, I've done quite well with my investments over the past decade, I interrupted. While you were buying vacation homes and sports cars, I was living below my means and building a portfolio. But you're right about one thing: I couldn't have acquired a controlling interest in FinEdge on my own. That's why I presented the opportunity to Beacon and co-invested. You went behind my back, Derek said, his voice rising. You manipulated this whole situation. I identified an investment opportunity and pursued it through proper channels. I corrected. The fact that the target company belonged to someone who repeatedly dismissed my financial acumen was ironic, certainly, but the deal was evaluated and executed based on its merits. Nothing more, nothing less. Derek slammed his hand on the table. This is about Thanksgiving, isn't it? Because I didn't offer you a partnership, so you decided to steal my company from me. This isn't about one dinner, Derek, I said quietly. This is about a lifetime of being underestimated, dismissed, and devalued. And for the record, I haven't stolen anything. FinEdge is still your company. You're still the CEO. I'm simply the majority shareholder now. Which means you can fire me whenever you want, he spat. I could, I acknowledged. But that's not my intention. Despite your blind spots, you've built something valuable. My goal isn't to destroy FinEdge, but to strengthen it. I pulled out my own folder and opened it on the table. These are the vulnerabilities I've identified in FinEdge's current business model and operations. Security issues that could lead to data breaches. Regulatory compliance gaps that will become serious problems when the new financial protection laws go into effect. Engineering resource deficiencies that are creating a growing technical debt. Derek stared at the pages, his anger momentarily replaced by surprise. How did you compile all this? By paying attention, by learning, by applying the analytical skills you and our parents never believed I possessed. Julian, who had been silent during our exchange, finally spoke. Derek, I understand this is a shock, but I can assure you that Beacon Ventures wouldn't have proceeded with this investment if we didn't believe it was in everyone's best interest, including yours. Your sister has identified ways to make FinEdge substantially more valuable. Derek closed the folder and stood up abruptly. I need to consult with my lawyers. This can't be legal. The contracts were reviewed by your legal team before signing. I reminded him. Everything is binding. You deceived me. You deliberately kept your involvement hidden. I used a standard investment vehicle, the kind you've used yourself in acquisitions. And at no point did you ask who the individual investors were. You assumed, as you always have, that I couldn't possibly be playing at your level. Derek's phone rang. Our father, according to the display. He must have heard something from his contacts in the finance world. Derek silenced the call. This conversation isn't over, he said, gathering his things. Not by a long shot. I agree, I replied. In fact, it's just beginning. The board meeting is scheduled for next Monday. I look forward to discussing FinEdge's future direction then. Derek stormed out of the conference room. As the door slammed behind him, Julian gave a low whistle. Well, he said, that went about as expected. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Phase 1 complete. Now comes the hard part. The weekend following my revelation to Derek was chaotic. My phone exploded with calls and texts, first from Derek, then from our parents, then from extended family members who'd somehow gotten wind of the situation. I let most go to voicemail, needing time to process my own emotions before dealing with theirs. Derek's messages oscillated between rage and desperate negotiation. "You can't do this to your own brother," one voicemail began before descending into threats of legal action. The next was conciliatory. "Let's talk about this like adults, Morgan. I'm sure we can work something out." Our parents' reactions were more complex. My father's first message was pure indignation. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? Do you have any idea what this is doing to your brother? To this family?" But by Sunday, his tone had shifted. "I had no idea you'd become so accomplished in finance. Why didn't you tell us?" My mother left a single tearful message. "Morgan, please call us. We need to understand what's happening." I spent the weekend in my apartment, alternating between reviewing FinEdge's financials and staring out the window at the Boston skyline. The victory I'd anticipated for so long felt hollow in some ways, complicated in others. I hadn't wanted to hurt Derek or my parents, not really. I'd wanted recognition, respect, a seat at the table I'd earned through years of discipline and hard work. But respect couldn't be seized. It had to be given freely. And I wasn't sure my family was capable of giving it, even now. Sunday night, I finally called my parents. The conversation was strained at first, my father demanding explanations, my mother weeping quietly in the background. I let them express their confusion and anger, then calmly explained the journey that had led to this moment. The years of dismissal, the Thanksgiving dinner that had been the breaking point, and most importantly, the legitimate business case for Beacon's investment in FinEdge. "The company has serious vulnerabilities," I explained. "Ones that Derek either doesn't see or won't address. This isn't personal, it's business." "Of course it's personal," my father exploded. "He's your brother." "Yes, and he's been treating me like an incompetent child for decades," I replied, my own anger finally surfacing. "Did you ever once defend me when he dismissed my accomplishments? Did either of you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, I had talents and abilities worth respecting?" Silence fell on the line. "Morgan," my mother said finally, her voice small, "we never meant to make you feel less than. We were just worried about your future." "My future has been secure for years," I said. "I've been building it while you were all too busy admiring Derek's success to notice." Another long silence followed. "Will you fire him?" my father asked eventually. "From his own company. That depends entirely on Derek," I answered honestly. "If he can accept the new reality and work with me to strengthen FinEdge, there's no reason for significant changes in day-to-day operations. If he can't, well, that's his choice." Monday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed with particular care for the board meeting, a custom-tailored suit in deep navy, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Professional, powerful, but not ostentatious. I wanted the focus to be on my ideas, not my appearance. Julian met me in the lobby of FinEdge's downtown offices. "Ready for this?" I nodded, though my stomach was in knots, as I'll ever be. The boardroom was tense when we entered. Derek sat at the far end of the table, flanked by his CFO and CTO. His eyes were bloodshot, his normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. He'd clearly had a rough weekend as well. The other board members, now primarily Beacon appointees, including Julian and myself, filled the remaining seats. The company secretary distributed materials for the meeting, including the analysis I'd prepared on FinEdge's vulnerabilities and proposed solutions. "Before we begin," Derek said, his voice tight, "I want to register my formal protest against the circumstances of Beacon's investment. I believe there were significant conflicts of interest that weren't disclosed. Julian cleared his throat. All disclosures required by law were made, Derek. The investment committee at Beacon evaluated this opportunity on its merits as we do all potential investments. My sister deliberately— Your sister? I interrupted. Identified an undervalued company with significant growth potential but also serious vulnerabilities. She presented that opportunity to her partners, who agreed it was worth pursuing. That's how business works. Derek's jaw clenched. And now you're going to fire me, dismantle what I've built. Actually, I said, sliding copies of a document across the table. I'd like to propose a different approach. I gestured to the materials I'd prepared. This is a comprehensive analysis of FinEdge's current position and a strategic plan for addressing its vulnerabilities while accelerating growth. I'd like us all to review it together. For the next 2 hours, I led the board through my analysis, the security weaknesses in FinEdge's platform, the looming regulatory challenges, the engineering resource gaps, but I also highlighted the company's strengths, its innovative approach to financial data management, its growing market share, its loyal early customers. Most importantly, I outlined a clear path forward, specific investments in engineering talent, a robust compliance framework, strategic partnerships that could accelerate growth. I'd done my homework meticulously, and it showed. As I spoke, I could see the initial skepticism in the room giving way to engagement. The CFO was taking detailed notes. The CTO was nodding at several of my technical observations. Even Derek's rigid posture had softened slightly, his business instincts temporarily overriding his personal feelings. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. These are sound recommendations, Derek's CFO said cautiously, especially regarding the regulatory compliance issues. I've been raising concerns about those for months. Derek shot him a sharp look, which didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. I'm not here to undermine FinEdge or to punish Derek, I said, addressing the elephant in the room. I'm here because I believe in the company's potential, and I want to help realize it. Yes, I now control a majority stake, but my goal isn't to tear down what's been built. It's to build it higher. I turned directly to Derek. You're a visionary founder. You identified a real need in the market and created an innovative solution. But no one person has all the answers, all the skills needed to scale a company successfully. Not me, not you, not anyone in this room. It takes a team with complementary strengths. Hey everyone, we're reaching a critical point in this family drama. If you've ever experienced that moment when someone who underestimated you finally sees your true worth, I know you're feeling the tension right now. Before we continue with what happens next in the boardroom, drop a comment about a time when you proved someone wrong about your abilities. And if you're enjoying this story of sweet, sweet karma, hit that like button and subscribe to catch more stories of justice served. Now, let's see if Derek can swallow his pride or if this family rift is about to get even deeper. Derek's expression remained guarded, but some of the hostility had faded. And where exactly do you see yourself fitting into this team? As executive chairperson, I replied, focusing on strategic direction, regulatory compliance, and investor relations. Areas where my experience at Beacon adds particular value. I leaned forward. You would remain as CEO, focusing on product development, customer acquisition, and day-to-day operations, the areas where you excel. Derek's eyebrows rose slightly. You're not firing me, not unless you force my hand, I said honestly. This isn't about revenge, Derek. It's about building something extraordinary together if you're willing. The rest of the meeting proceeded with cautious optimism. The board voted to adopt my strategic plan with a few minor modifications suggested by the CFO. Derek remained largely silent, but he didn't object progress of a sort. As the meeting adjourned, Derek gestured for me to stay behind. The others filed out, Julian giving me a supportive nod as he closed the door. Alone with my brother for the first time since the revelation, I waited for him to speak. Why? He asked simply. Why go to these lengths? Why not just talk to me? Would you have listened? I countered. Really listened without dismissing me as your financially incompetent little sister. Derek had the grace to look uncomfortable. You could have shown me your portfolio, your credentials. I didn't know you'd become a partner at Beacon, because you never asked Derek. Not once in all those family dinners did you or our parents ever really ask about my career, my achievements, my goals. You all decided who I was years ago, and nothing I said would have changed that perception. So you engineered this coup instead. I engineered a strategic investment in a promising company with fixable problems I corrected. The fact that it forced you to finally see me clearly was a necessary side effect. Derek ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our childhood when he was trying to solve a difficult problem. And now what? We pretend everything's fine, play happy corporate family. No, I said. Now we start over. As equals. As partners who respect each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. No more golden child, no more family disappointment. Just two professionals building something valuable together. If that's even possible after this, that's entirely up to you, I told him. I've made my choice. Now you need to make yours. The following weeks were a delicate dance. Derek and I established a wary professional relationship, cordial but distant. We communicated primarily through emails and scheduled meetings, avoiding the casual interactions that might veer into our complicated personal history. The FinEdge executive team watched this strange detente with confusion, unsure how to navigate the new power dynamic between the Reynolds siblings. I focused on implementing the strategic plan I'd presented to the board. My first priority was addressing the regulatory compliance issues, the most immediate threat to FinEdge's operations. I hired a top-tier compliance officer from one of Beacon's portfolio companies and assembled a team to revamp the company's data protection protocols before the new financial regulations took effect. Derek, to his credit, didn't actively obstruct these changes. He retreated into product development, his area of genuine expertise, working closely with the engineering team to enhance FinEdge's core platform. We operated in parallel, rarely intersecting, except for required executive meetings. Our parents attempted to broker peace through a series of uncomfortable family dinners, which both Derek and I attended out of obligation rather than desire. These gatherings were stilted affairs, conversation carefully steered toward neutral topics, the weather, distant relatives, non-controversial current events. The elephant in the room remained unaddressed. 6 weeks after the board meeting, I was working late in my new office at FinEdge, the corner office adjacent to Derek's previously occupied by his COO who had left during the transition. A soft knock on my door interrupted my concentration. "Come in," I called, expecting the cleaning staff or perhaps one of the compliance team with a question. Instead, Derek entered holding 2 glasses and a bottle of Macallan 18, the scotch our father had always favored for celebrating significant business achievements. "Peace offering," he said, lifting the bottle slightly. "Got a minute?" Surprised, I nodded, closing my laptop. "Sure." Derek poured 2 measures, sliding one across the desk to me before taking the visitor's chair. He looked tired. The past weeks had taken a toll on him as well. "The quarterly reports came in today," he said after a moment. "The compliance framework you implemented has already prevented 2 potential data breaches. And the engineering team you brought in has reduced our technical debt by 30%. "That's good news," I replied cautiously. "It is," he sipped his scotch. "You were right about the vulnerabilities. I didn't want to see them because they weren't in the parts of the business I was focused on or particularly interested in." This was as close to an admission of error as I'd ever heard from my brother. I nodded, acknowledging his words without pressing for more. "The CTO showed me the security audit you commissioned," Derek continued. "If those weaknesses had gone unaddressed and resulted in a major breach." He shook his head. the company would have been finished. Our customers' financial data exposed, our reputation destroyed. That's why I pushed for it to be addressed immediately, I said. Financial technology is built on trust. Once that's gone, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Derek took another sip of his scotch, contemplating. You know, when we were kids, you used to follow me around asking questions about everything. I thought you were just being annoying, the pesky little sister. I never realized you were actually learning. I've always been learning, I said quietly. Watching, listening, absorbing. It's just that no one was watching me back. A moment of uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I underestimated you, Derek finally admitted. Massively. Catastrophically. I looked at your art history degree and your modest apartment and made assumptions about your capabilities. That was... He seemed to search for the right word. Short-sighted. And arrogant. Coming from Derek, this was an unprecedented acknowledgement. Yes, it was, I agreed, not softening the blow. Just as our parents were short-sighted in deciding my worth based on my choice of major rather than my actual abilities. Derek winced slightly but nodded. Fair enough. Though in their defense, and maybe mine too, you played your cards very close to the chest. The quiet artistic daughter secretly becoming a venture capital partner. It's not exactly what any of us saw coming. Maybe because none of you were looking, I replied, but without the bitterness that would have colored such a statement weeks ago. But you're right, I didn't share my journey. After years of dismissal, I stopped trying. It was easier to let you all believe what you wanted while I built my own path. Derek swirled the amber liquid in his glass. That Thanksgiving dinner, when I waved that partnership agreement in your face. God, I was such an ass. Yes, you were, I agreed, allowing a small smile. But it was the wake-up call I needed. Sometimes humiliation is a powerful motivator. And revenge, he asked, meeting my eyes directly. I considered the question seriously. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about finally being seen. About having a seat at the table I'd earned but would never be offered freely. And now, where do we go from here? That depends, I said. Can you truly accept me as an equal partner, not just tolerate the new power structure, but actually value what I bring to FinEdge? Derek was silent for a long moment, considering. I think I'm starting to. The results speak for themselves. He gestured to the quarterly reports on my desk. You've addressed problems I didn't even want to acknowledge existed. The company is stronger for it. He leaned forward, his expression more earnest than I'd seen it in years. I won't pretend it's not difficult adjusting to this new reality. My ego is. Well, you know how big it is. A self-deprecating smile flashed across his face. But I'm not stupid. FinEdge is better with both of us leading it, your strategic vision, my product focus. We complement each other, we always did, I said softly. Even as kids. You rushed ahead, I considered all angles. You took risks, I calculated outcomes. The visionary and the pragmatist, Derek, agreed. We clinked glasses tentatively, a fragile truce forming. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Over the next 6 months, FinEdge underwent a transformation. The regulatory compliance framework I implemented became a competitive advantage when the new financial protection laws went into effect, allowing us to onboard enterprise clients who valued security and data protection. Derek's product innovations, now properly supported by the expanded engineering team, kept us ahead of emerging market trends. Gradually, our professional relationship evolved into a genuine partnership. We developed a rhythm. Derek would generate bold ideas. I would stress test them for risks and implementation challenges. Sometimes we disagreed vigorously, but increasingly these disagreements led to stronger outcomes as we pushed each other to justify our positions with data and sound reasoning. The executive team, initially wary of the sibling dynamic, came to appreciate the balance we brought. It's like watching a high wire act, our CFO commented during one strategy session. Somehow, you two always end up on the same side of the rope, even when you start at opposite ends. Our parents watched this evolution with a mixture of confusion, pride, and lingering discomfort. The family's hierarchy had been fundamentally disrupted, and they struggled to find their footing in the new reality. My father, in particular, oscillated between amazement at my business acumen and discomfort at the methods I'd used to demonstrate it. "I still don't understand why you kept your success so secret," he said during a rare one-on-one lunch 3 months after the takeover. "All those years letting us think you were just getting by when you were actually building something significant," I supplied. "Tell me honestly, Dad, if I had told you about my promotions, my investments, my growing portfolio, would you have believed it was because of my abilities? Or would you have assumed I got lucky or had help, or was simply exaggerating?" The father's silence was answer enough. That's why I said gently, "I needed to prove it to myself first, without the weight of your skepticism or Derek's dismissal. And once I had that proof, I needed you all to see it so clearly that it couldn't be explained away or diminished. Through a corporate takeover of your brother's company," my father said, a note of disapproval still evident. "Through a strategic investment that has made that company significantly more valuable," I corrected. "FinEdge's valuation has increased 40% since Beacon came on board. Derek's remaining stake is worth more now than his entire ownership was before." My father couldn't argue with those numbers. Gradually, he began to see me through a new lens, not as his artistic daughter who needed guidance, but as a shrewd businesswoman who had outmaneuvered everyone's expectations, including his own. My mother's adjustment was different, but equally profound. During a weekend visit to her home, I found her in the study sorting through old family photographs. "Look at this," she said, holding up a picture from my childhood, me at about 8 years old sitting cross-legged on the floor with papers spread around me. "You were organizing your sticker collection by theme, rarity, and trade value, creating a whole system for maximizing your trades with friends." She shook her head wonderingly. "The signs were always there, weren't they? We just didn't know how to read them. I was always more like Dad than either of you realized," I said. "The same analytical mind, the same strategic thinking, it just expressed itself differently. We should have seen it," she acknowledged. "Instead, we pushed you toward what we thought was the safe path. Marriage stability, predictability." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and pride. "I'm sorry, Morgan. We underestimated you. I underestimated you." It was the apology I hadn't realized I was waiting for. The acknowledgement that validated not just my success, but the journey that had led to it. "Thank you," I said, simply taking her hand. At FinEdge, Derek and I continued to forge our new partnership. We established a clear division of responsibilities. I handled strategic planning, investor relations, and compliance. He focused on product development, customer experience, and innovation. In executive meetings, we presented a united front, though the team came to expect and even value our different perspectives during internal discussions. 9 months after the takeover, we faced our first major crisis together. A competitor launched a platform with features remarkably similar to FinEdge's proprietary algorithms, suspiciously similar. Initial investigations suggested a possible data breach or insider leak from months earlier during the period before my security upgrades were implemented. Derek was furious, ready to launch immediate legal action. "They stole our technology. We need to shut them down now," I urged caution. "Before we rush into litigation, we need to understand exactly what happened and when. We need evidence that will stand up in court." We argued intensely, each convinced our approach was correct. But unlike our past conflicts, this one ended differently. After making our cases, we both paused to really listen to the other's perspective. "You're right that we need solid evidence," Derek conceded. "Rushing into court unprepared could backfire. And you're right that we need to act decisively to protect our intellectual property, I acknowledged. Let's do both. Launch a thorough investigation while also having outside counsel prepare for potential legal action. We assembled a response team, legal experts, cybersecurity specialists, and key engineers to trace the source of the leak and document the similarities between our technology and the competitor's platform. The investigation revealed that a former employee who had left during the transition period had taken proprietary code with them to the competing firm. With solid evidence in hand, we took legal action. The case never reached court. Faced with our documentation, the competitor agreed to a substantial settlement and ceased using the stolen technology. It was a decisive victory for FinEdge and one that neither Derek nor I could have achieved alone. As we celebrated the resolution with the executive team, I caught Derek watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before, not just respect, but something closer to admiration. Later, as we debriefed in his office, he said, "You know, if this had happened before you came on board, I probably would have rushed into a legal battle without sufficient evidence and potentially lost both the case and our competitive advantage. And if I had been handling it alone, I admitted I might have been too cautious, allowing the investigation to drag on while they continued using our technology." "We make a good team," Derek said, and for the first time since the takeover, it didn't sound like a grudging admission. "We do," I agreed. "Better than either of us expected." As I turned to leave, Derek called after me. "Morgan, that Thanksgiving dinner. When I said you were too poor for a partnership," he shook his head ruefully. "Karma's a bitch, isn't it?" I couldn't help but laugh. Sometimes she is. But sometimes she's exactly what we need to grow. 1 year after the Beacon investment in FinEdge, we hosted a company anniversary celebration. The event was held at an upscale venue overlooking the Boston Harbor, with employees, investors, clients, and family members all in attendance. The mood was celebratory. FinEdge had just closed its most successful quarter to date. Our customer base had doubled, and industry analysts were touting us as one of the most promising fintech companies to watch. As I mingled with guests, I caught glimpses of Derek across the room confidently discussing product roadmaps with major clients. There was a ease to his manner, now a security that came from knowing his company was thriving, even if his role within it had changed dramatically from what he'd envisioned. Our parents were there too, having gradually adjusted to the new family dynamic. My father, now semi-retired from his own business ventures, had become one of my most interested sounding boards for strategic decisions. My mother had taken to sending me articles on women business leaders, a tacit acknowledgement of her evolving understanding of my path. Julian approached me, champagne in hand. "Congratulations, Morgan. When you proposed this investment, I thought you were either brilliant or reckless. Now I know it was definitely the former." "Thank you for taking the chance," I replied. Not many VCs would have backed a deal with such personal complications. "The numbers spoke for themselves," he said, ever the pragmatic investor. "But I'll admit, watching the Reynolds siblings transform FinEdge has been one of the more interesting case studies of my career." As the evening progressed, Derek clinked his glass for attention. The room quieted as he took center stage. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this milestone," he began. "A year ago, FinEdge entered a new chapter when Beacon Ventures became our strategic partner." A knowing smile crossed his face. "Or, more accurately, when my sister Morgan engineered the most elegant corporate takeover in recent memory." Surprised laughter rippled through the crowd. This was not the narrative we usually presented publicly, though rumors had certainly circulated in Boston's close-knit business community. Many of you know that I initially resisted this transition. Derek continued, understatement evident in his tone. "Change is difficult, especially when it comes packaged with the realization that you've severely underestimated someone close to you." He gestured for me to join him. Somewhat warily, I moved to his side. What I didn't understand a year ago, what I couldn't see through my own pride, was that FinEdge wasn't just my vision to realize. It needed more than I alone could provide. It needed Morgan's strategic insight, her attention to detail, her ability to see vulnerabilities before they become crises. He turned to face me directly. In short, it needed exactly what I had spent years dismissing. The room had gone completely silent, everyone witnessing a moment of vulnerability from the normally confident, sometimes arrogant Derek Reynolds. So while this is certainly a celebration of FinEdge's success, he continued for me, it's also an acknowledgement of how wrong I was. At our family Thanksgiving dinner last year, I told my sister she was too poor for partnership. Today, she owns 70% of my company. He raised his glass. To Morgan Reynolds, who taught me the most expensive and valuable business lesson of my life. The crowd applauded as we clinked glasses. It was a public acknowledgement I hadn't expected and found myself deeply moved by. When the formal program ended, Derek and I stepped out onto the venue's terrace for a moment of quiet amid the celebration. "That was quite a speech," I said. "It was the truth," he replied simply. "Overdue but genuine." We stood in companionable silence, watching the lights reflect on the harbor waters. "Do you remember when we were kids?" Derek said eventually, "and Dad would take us to his office on the weekends sometimes. You always brought your sketchbook, and I assumed you were just drawing to pass the time." "I remember. I found one of those old sketchbooks when I was cleaning out some storage last month. Know what I saw when I actually looked at it?" He turned to face me. "You weren't just drawing random pictures. You were sketching diagrams of Dad's office layout with notes about how to improve workflow, organizational charts with alternative structures, even a rudimentary business model for his company, complete with stick figures representing different roles." I laughed softly. I was always analyzing, always thinking about systems and structures. Art was just the language I used to express it before I learned the language of business. "You were a strategist even then," Derek acknowledged. "I just couldn't see past my own assumptions." He paused. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me?" For all those years of dismissal, I considered the question seriously. I think forgiveness has already happened gradually through our work together this past year. Every time you truly listened to my perspective, every time you acknowledged my expertise without qualification, that was healing something between us. And, Mom and Dad, that's more complicated, I admitted. There's more history there, more deeply ingrained patterns. But we're finding a new equilibrium. They're seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time. "And what about you?" Derek asked. "Has this all been worth it? Getting the recognition you deserved, but at the cost of so much family tension?" I gazed out at the harbor lights, reflecting on the journey. "Yes," I said finally. "Not just for the recognition, though, that matters, but because FinEdge is genuinely better with both of us leading it. The company we're building together is stronger than what either of us would have created alone." Derek nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "To unexpected partnerships, then," he said, raising his glass one more time. "To unexpected partnerships," I echoed. "And to finally being seen." As the celebration continued inside, I took a moment to savor the completion of a circle. From that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner, to tonight's public acknowledgement from being dismissed, to being respected from fighting for recognition, to standing confidently in my power. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward, but it had led exactly where I needed to go. Hey everyone, I hope you found my story as satisfying as I found living through it. If you've ever experienced family dynamics where you had to prove yourself, or if you've witnessed karma come full circle in your own life, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Has anyone in your family ever underestimated you, only to be surprised by what you were capable of? That moment when Derek finally had to publicly acknowledge my capabilities was years in the making, and I'm curious if you've had similar experiences. If this story of family dynamics and sweet justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories with unexpected twists. I share new content every week about family, relationships, professional growth, and those satisfying moments when life lessons come home to roost. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes playing the long game is worth it in the end. Thank you so much for watching my story of family redemption and professional vindication. Remember, sometimes the people who doubt you the most become your biggest supporters once they see what you're truly capable of. Until next time, keep believing in yourself even when others don't. Your moment of recognition might be just around the corner.